Philippe Bourciquot used his Haitian background and his radio show to gain the trust of his Haitian listeners and then stole their money. And Tyler Tisdale stole money from his trusting clients, people such as NFL quarterbacks Carson Palmer and Matt Castle, and his own parents. Let's get right to the scammers who had everyone's trust. Philippe Bourciquot used his position on a popular radio show in Florida to compel the hard-working Haitian community into giving him their money for massive returns. He made promises of using investors' money in the forex market for unbelievable returns. In his own words, he said, quote, "You give me $20,000, it's guaranteed that you'll receive 60% in a year." However, this was far from what happened. People had no idea they were falling into his scam. Investigators said that his radio show had many red flags. During his broadcast, he would continuously enforce the idea of being a member of the Haitian community. He did this solely to gain their trust, using clever phrases such as, quote, "one of you." He also made it clear that the opportunities were limited so that the listeners could take action immediately. He was smart in the fact that he not only built his trust within the Haitian community, but also created urgency among the listeners, which caused them to take action out of fear. By promising them 60% in return on investment, he scammed millions of dollars from the locals. He even went as far as to target the Haitian community at churches. His victims were simply supporting the luxurious lifestyle that he was living. There weren't any available court records for Bourciquot's charges back in 2014. However, in May 2018, he was caught in another scheme where he was preparing tax returns for other people. A federal court in Miami, Florida, permanently stopped Bourciquot's and another partner from preparing federal tax returns for other people. Authorities found that Bourciquot continually claimed education credits for taxpayers who didn't incur any qualifying expenses. The complaint also alleged that they fabricated business income or expenses for other people in order to qualify for the earned income credit. Number 4. A Mirage. Michael Corta ran an investment company called Oasis International Group. And from 2011 to 2019, he simply took his investors' money, which totaled $80 million, and just spent it on his own lifestyle. According to investigators, Corta and his partners in crime convinced their roughly 700 victims by persuading them that they were, quote, market makers. So they were making huge margins from forex trades because they had so much volume. They told investors that their investments would be risk-free, quote, for the most part. He also explained that Oasis was well collateralized and had plenty of backing. In reality, Oasis didn't generate any revenue at all, and all the earnings that Oasis made were just a mirage. Once he got investor money, Corta just went to town. For example, he bought a Maserati and a Range Rover for his family members. He also bought at least one Ferrari, 2 Benzes, and a Porsche with investor funds. And those are just the cars that the government was able to seize. He also took his family on several trips via private jet, taking them around expensive vacation spots such as Europe and the Cayman Islands. He also purchased multi-million-dollar homes in Florida. After a 13-day trial, a federal jury found Corta guilty for his Ponzi scheme. Even though the trial took over 13 days, it took the jury less than 4 hours of discussion to convict Corta of his crimes. He was also convicted of underreporting his income in 2017. He had claimed negative income for the year and got a tax refund instead. His sentencing will be happening at a later date as of the release of this video, but he faces a max of 33 years in prison. Number 3. Factored in. Former Georgia legislator Clarence Deal Alford ran a $23 million Ponzi scheme where he targeted people with ancestry or ties to India. He fooled more than 100 investors from the Indian American community into thinking they were investing in a highly lucrative business opportunity. His previous political career made him a key candidate to pull off this scam since he had a trustworthy and respectable professional history. Alford was a General Assembly member in Georgia for 5 terms from 1983 to 1993. Alford was able to run his scam by exploiting a common finance practice that's called factoring. Basically, what factoring is where a company will sell its accounts receivable to a third party at a discount. This way, they have their cash much faster instead of having to wait for the money. Businesses will do this basically just to have cash on hand to pay the bills. Alford's scam was based on completely fake receivable invoices. He was creating fake documents, essentially fake contracts and invoices. He went as far as forging signatures of employees of the state of Georgia. He promised investors that he would use their money for energy projects, but instead, he simply paid off earlier investors. He also used investor money on unrelated projects such as a waste-to-energy project and a solar energy project. Of course, these projects weren't linked to the investors. Alford also used investor money to pay an architect for a personal multi-million-dollar home in Utah. He also bought a Tesla and used the money to pay off credit card debt. We're just wondering, if you're going to run a scam, why bother paying off your credit cards? Judge Robert F. Mumford sentenced Alford to 15 years, where he'll spend 8 years in prison and the remaining 7 years on probation. Alford also had to pay back $8.8 million, along with interest of $1.7 million. Interestingly enough, the judgment was part of a consent agreement where Alford neither admitted to nor denied the allegations. Did Alford just suck so bad at running a legitimate business where it just looked like he was running a scam? Number 2, not winning. Win Charlebois was charged with operating a Ponzi scheme where he scammed at least 75 investors out of roughly $7.1 million. He took investor funds and moved money all around where it looked like he was running a legitimate fund. But surprise, surprise, that wasn't happening. According to the SEC's complaint, Charlebois basically promised investors return on their money with multiple fake investment opportunities. These fake opportunities range from the purchase and resale of planes, the investment of a variety of private companies, and subscription agreements where funds were supposed to be used to invest in a tech company. Investigators simply found zero cash flow that was linked to any legitimate business. The only cash flow that was coming in was from investors. Most of the new money Charlebois raised from investors and obtained from loans was spent paying former investors and repaying anyone else that was supposed to get money back. Of course, the rest of the money Charlebois used on himself and his family. He used investor funds to pay off his mortgage, debt, and tuition fees for his kids. He even used the money for personal and leisure expenses, such as an exotic vacation. He didn't shy away from spending investor money. He took his family on a ski trip to Beaver Creek, Colorado in January 2021, a 4-day excursion that cost him around $9,100. They stayed at the Ritz and had expenses that included roughly $1,800 for ski access and rentals, and also $1,200 for limo service for the 4-day vacation. In March 2021, Charlebois and his family traveled to Boca Grande, Florida for a week-long vacation. The family splashed around roughly $9,000 again, despite having a negative balance in their joint checking account. Clearly, his spending habits were relentless. The SEC is still seeking to stop Win Charlebois with an asset freeze, as well as making him repay his investors plus interest and civil penalties. Number 1, serial scamming. Tyler Tisdale was able to con more than $46 million from 77 investors, which included former NFL quarterbacks Carson Palmer and Matt Castle, through his management fund, Cobalt Sports Capital. Tisdale's immediate family, including his parents-in-laws, lost a total of $4 million investing with his fund. Tisdale advertised his company on having access to exclusive deals and running their own successful businesses. However, they only made small loans to entertainers and athletes, and these loans were almost scams in and of themselves, as they were handed out at exorbitant interest rates. According to the DA's office, Tisdale and his business partner, Grant Carter, sold investors on the idea of making massive returns with very little risk. They also completely lied about the business opportunities they had. For example, Tisdale made false claims that his management company was valued at $15 million. He also said that the company's private label wine business, Curious Cork Import LLC, alone was going to be worth $25 million soon. They told investors that they could expect to see 10 to 15 times their investment. Instead, the 3 investors he and Grant pitched that deal to lost a total of $500,000. For that little stunt, they were actually charged back in 2020, and as part of their plea deal, they paid back the $500,000 to those investors. In court, Tisdale's attorney argued that Tisdale shouldn't go to prison because he didn't, quote, line his with the investors' money. He argued that he invested their money in legitimate companies. The only thing he wasn't clear on was being dishonest with investors about where that money was going. And, that little thing about the risk of the investments. His lawyer, Fred Winokur, argued that Tisdale wasn't a Ponzi schemer and that he believed in the companies he advertised. He also tried to convince the jury that Tisdale was doing what was in the best interest of his investors and lenders. He also pointed out that his own parents and immediate family lost their money too investing with Tisdale, and would he scam his own family? Winokur argued that Tisdale had the best of intentions, but he simply was in over his head. He was blinded by his pride and his desire to maintain his reputation. However, prosecutor I.L. Shamsuddin pointed out that Tisdale used money from new investors to pay old investors. We all know what exactly that means. He argued that Tisdale knew exactly what he was doing, and he knew what he was doing was wrong. He also asked that Tisdale be sentenced to 6 years in prison. Tyler Tisdale pleaded guilty in June of 2021, and prosecutor Shamsuddin got his wish. Tisdale was sentenced to 6 years in prison, as well as having to pay back more than $18 million in restitution. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section what you'd rather do. Invest $5,000 in Bitcoin or enter a fantasy football league that costs $500.